Welcome. Today we are examining the mechanics of politics and education. The standard assumption is that a classroom is a sterile laboratory, a place where objective facts and universal truths are handed down from teacher to student, insulated from the outside world. That assumption is entirely backward. Education is the most contested battleground for political ideology and state control in modern society. The educational system operates on a dual frequency. It is the prerequisite for democratic survival and simultaneously a sophisticated instrument for state discipline. To unpack this, we will use two analytical lenses. First, we will examine philosopher John Dewey's argument that schools function as miniature democratic communities to sustain civic life. Second, we will apply Michel Foucault's theory of disciplinary power, examining how educational institutions physically and psychologically normalize student behavior. Finally, we will look at how local educators push back against state control through specific pedagogical choices and civic agency. Recognizing this hidden political architecture is the first step for anyone studying public policy or stepping to the front of a classroom. We begin with philosopher John Dewey. He argued that education is the primary means by which any society perpetuates its values and renews itself. This brings us to the concept of democratic reciprocity. A functioning democracy requires an educated, critically thinking electorate. In turn, the kind of education that develops independent minds can only thrive in a democratic environment. This loop begins with civic literacy. Schools equip citizens with the baseline knowledge of their rights, their duties, and the mechanics of the rule of law. Beyond rote knowledge, the cultivation of critical thinking enables future citizens to evaluate competing political claims, engage in respectful disagreement, and resist authoritarian propaganda. These theoretical ideals translate directly to measurable data. Higher educational attainment consistently correlates with higher rates of voting, community engagement, and overall political awareness. Conversely, when a state fails to invest in quality public education, it creates an uninformed electorate, highly susceptible to demagoguery and manipulation. Dewey viewed the classroom as a miniature democratic community, a living environment where the social contract is validated and sustained in real time. Because the stakes of education are high, the state rarely leaves it to chance. It actively asserts control over the classroom through legal rational authority. This control is structured through a top-down hierarchy. At the peak is the national parliament, dictating the broad legal framework through education acts. From there, the bureaucratic flow moves downward to the Ministry of Education and its directorates, which handle day-to-day policy enforcement. The state wields two major instruments. First is the national curriculum, explicitly dictating what knowledge is valued and what is excluded. The second is the public examination system. These standardized tests act as gatekeepers, regulating access to higher education and defining social mobility. The invisible force driving this entire bureaucratic flowchart is political ideology. A liberal ideology, for instance, typically promotes universal access, rational inquiry, and pluralism. An authoritarian ideology uses the exact same bureaucratic structures to demand obedience, strictly control content, and enforce state conformity. A syllabus is the engineered physical manifestation of the prevailing political ideology, explicitly designed to shape the next generation. While the curriculum manages what students learn, the school also manages the students themselves. This brings us to the sociologist Michel Foucault. Foucault advanced the premise that educational institutions function alongside prisons and hospitals as primary sites of disciplinary power. This power operates through structural order, the physical arrangement of desks facing forward, the adherence to academic calendars, and rigid institutional hierarchies. It also operates through normative order, the internal rules, reward systems, and punishments that normalize compliance and penalize deviation. These combined forces manufacture subjects who instinctively conform to the physical and psychological requirements of the broader socioeconomic order. Even the act of grading functions as a core tool of this discipline. It serves as a quantified surveillance mechanism, enforcing behavioral and academic standards. School discipline is inherently political. It is the subtle mechanism by which the state reproduces power and order without ever needing to apply physical force. However, state control is rarely absolute. The counterforce emerges through pedagogical civic agency, where local educators actively shape political competencies. We can see this agency in action through the Bengali Human Rights Education module, developed for students in West Bengal. The text in the module's preface explicitly links the act of education to the establishment of human rights, framing the classroom as the environment where justice and tolerance must be nurtured first. The pedagogical structure directly supports this. By assigning individual work, or ekak kaj, educators deliberately build independent thought, self-awareness, and personal responsibility. Moving downward to group work, or dalagat kaj, collaborative tasks are specifically engineered to teach empathy, active listening, and pluralism. In the analysis phase, students are explicitly taught to rationally debate, defend their opinions with logic, and synthesize diverse, sometimes conflicting viewpoints. These micro-actions inside the classroom, the group work and structured analysis, are exactly what John Dewey meant. They build the macro-political outcomes of democratic participation and reasoned disagreement. A teacher's choice of methodology is a profound political act, the moment where abstract democratic theory is forged into practical reality. The modern classroom is the focal point where two massive forces collide: the state's demand for disciplined subjects and democracy's demand for free, critical citizens. Citizens influence the outcome of this collision from the outside through voting and community advocacy. Educators and students influence it from the inside through professional advocacy, student movements, and pedagogical choices. As we established at the beginning, there is no such thing as a politically neutral education. To teach, to write a syllabus, or to actively design a national curriculum is to wield immense political power. Mastering the art of teaching requires navigating this invisible political architecture, balancing the weight of state authority against the necessity of democratic life.